Welcome everybody. We are so excited that you could join us for the December 13th Metropolitan Council Management Committee agenda today. We do have a quorum, so we'll conduct business. I'm sorry. We're so excited. Okay. For December 13th. Okay. All right. So what we have on the agenda today is approval of the agenda. Everybody's received that in advance. If there aren't any other changes or edits, without objection, I will move that the agenda is approved and we can move forward. Everyone has also received, as item number 2, the draft minutes from our November 8th Management Committee meeting. Everyone again should have had a chance to look those over. Are there any changes or edits? Seeing none then, I would entertain a motion to approve. Moved by Osmond, is there a second? Second. Seconded by Cedarburg. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. And those opposed, no. And that passes unanimously. Now we will move on to our non-consent business, reports of standing committees. And our first item on this agenda is 2023-278. It's the same week. It's an e-builder software maintenance agreement, contract number 18M120, Amendment 1. And we have a team coming up. Jody maybe, or Sue. Sue is coming up too. There you are, Sue. Sorry, I lost you behind the column back there. Everybody, Sue is acting as our interim chief information.
That's correct.
So welcome to Sue to this meeting. Thank you, Jody, for being here. And I'll turn it over to you to give us the report today.
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, committee members. My name is Sue Hauge, the acting CIO, and you know Jody Jacoby, our Chief Procurement Officer. And we are here today to present business item 2023-278 SW for e-builder software maintenance agreement contract. And so e-builder is a cloud-based project management solution that was designed for capital projects. And what it does is it manages capital program, cost, schedule, and documents. It provides a single location to submit, review, approve, and access project documents. Now, Metro Transit has been using this software since 2010. And then in 2018, we expanded its use to environmental services. So this contract amendment extends the current services and actually adds the use of e-builder for more parts of the council to Metro Transportation Services, so to MTS as well. MTS also has a need to manage their service contracts in the same way that Transit and ES manages their construction contracts. So when we did this contract amendment, we did this with an enterprise lens. So each division has expanded its functionality, and we're adding more divisions to the contract as well, with continued improvement in project outcomes. So by looking at this from an enterprise perspective and combining project management requirements for all divisions under one umbrella, it led us to significant cost savings. And so we were able to take advantage of the buying power from the council perspective. And so this amendment reduces the amount of time required by council staff to learn, understand, onboard, and sustain multiple project management systems. It also allows for the continuity of project management of ES and Metro Transit.
Jody?
So, Madam Chair, council members, this really is just a standard contract amendment where the value is increasing 10% and it's within your signature authority. So that's why we have the business item before you to approve the action. And the project team, Procurement and IS and our business partners who are using this have determined the price is fair and reasonable, not only with the licensing, but looking at some software we have that other properties are paying, and they want to continue to use and expand the system for support council-wide.
Anything else? Are there any questions?
Yeah.
Councilmember Cedarburg.
Thank you. I just have a question on who pays for this? Is it at the regional administration level, or is each department billed for their percentage of use? Just a curiosity, I just didn't know.
Yeah, I could answer that, Chair, committee member. This is paid for actually both at the regional administration level, and what we do is we bill out the cost to the divisions.
Any other questions? Just briefly, what was MTS or these other divisions using before this
They were,
platform?
they weren't using that was the issue.
Oh.
They weren't using anything. They were doing a lot of manual work, spreadsheets, that kind of thing. So this will greatly enhance the efficiency of managing their contracts.
Oh, well, that's great. So, wow, okay, that's good then. I did not realize that. Okay, any other questions? Comments, Councilmember Osmond?
Is there any other division that are not using for this software or this e-builder?
Well, Chair, committee member, right now, there aren't any other divisions using it. This is primarily for construction contracts, and ES and Transit are the two divisions that use construction. However, MTS is going to be using it in a different way. So I think that there is opportunities in the future for other divisions to leverage the functionality, and I think we're going to learn a lot actually from how MTS uses it.
And then sole source, so eBuilder obviously is still the company to be with. Okay. Is there
Correct.
any other competition and anybody, or are we just sole sourcing this because we're satisfied with where we're going on this?
Yeah, great question. Madam Chair, committee members, it is a sole source. We have quite a bit of time and investment with eBuilder and with training. There are other platforms out there, but at this time it makes sense to continue using eBuilder because of their level of service, because of the experience that we have, the efficiency, in addition to competitive pricing.
Great, thank you. Anything else on this one? All right then, seeing none, we have before us the proposed action that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute an amendment for contract 18M120 with eBuilder Inc. that will increase the maximum not to exceed amount to $4,870,000 and $70,001. Is there a motion to approve?
So,
It's been moved by Barbara, seconded by Osmond, or vice versa, however you, yep. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, no. And that passes unanimously, so thank you very much for your presentation today. Appreciate your diligence on this, and it sounds like we're moving in a very positive direction for MTS. Our next item that we have on the agenda is 2023-306. It's Target Fund Policy, FM 2-3 update, and we have Marie Henderson, our acting Chief Financial Officer, with us today. So thanks for joining us, Marie.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I am Marie Henderson. I'm your acting CFO, and I'm here to present business item 2023-306 Target Fund Policy Update. The Council's Finance and Asset Management Policy, which is FM 2-2, requires that financial resources be restricted by each operational unit. And that policy further provides that each unit will respond to a year-end deficit or surpluses generated by that unit. So to promote responsible financial management, it is prudent for the Council to adopt a target fund balance for each operating fund. The target fund balances are intended to help operation units meet cash flow needs and to ensure adequate protection for unanticipated events. The targets are intended to be benchmarks and not absolutes. So there's two changes proposed on this policy. The first change is for the Metro Mobility target fund balance from a 10% down to a 5% minimum target fund balance. The Metro Mobility program will become a state-funded program starting in the state's fiscal year 2026. And this will allow the council to spend down those reserve balances for the new minimum balance to maintain a lower fund balance while still remaining prudent to the council's funds. And the second change is for the new operating reserve balance for the new Metropolitan Area Transportation Sales and Use Tax that began collections on October 1st of 2023. This will be used to help manage the cash flow volatility, much like what we do for our motor vehicle sales tax. In perspective, that sales tax started October 1st. I'm now hearing from Dora we will not get our first payment till January 10th for October. So this will really help with the cash flow volatility. Well, we've used a couple of Thrive lenses for this policy. One is accountability. We follow the best practices with the Government Financial Officers Association, the GFOA, using a conservative and fiscally responsible approach for our financial management. And we are looking at it on a stewardship for following responsible financial management and strategy through our council's resources. So, Madam Chair, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to amend the council's target fund balance policy for Metro Mobility funds and the Metropolitan Area Transportation Sales and Use Tax in accordance to the attached revised target fund balance policy.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, it's kind of an adjacent question. So we budget MVST at 95%. Are we planning to do something similar with the sales and use tax?
We are looking at cash flow right now.
Okay.
We haven't really established it. We'll bring recommendations forward of how to do the sales tax forecasting once we kind of see a little bit better our cash flow.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Anything else? Any other discussion? All right, seeing none then, we have the proposed action. I'll read it again, that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to amend the council's target fund balance policy for Metro Mobility funds and Metropolitan Area Transportation Sales and Use Tax in accordance with the attached revised target fund balance policy. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the recommendation. Moved by Barber, is there a second? Second. Seconded by Cedarburg. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That passes unanimously, so thank you very much. And are you up for the next one as well?
We are.
Well, super. All right, for under our information items, our first item is our quarterly financial report, and Marie will be giving us the presentation today. And we've got some more exciting things coming after that. So welcome, everybody. Turn it back to you, Marie.
Perfect. So, Madam Chair and committee members, we're here today to present to you the 2023 third quarter financial report and projections of the end of the year. For this first slide, this is per our policy, FM 2-3, which you just heard, to make sure that we have a responsible financial management of each of our operating funds. This does not include the business item that we just talked about because it still needs to be fully approved through the council, and so Metro Mobility is still at that 10%. But you can see that all of our funds are projected to be at or above our minimum target balances by fiscal year end, and Ed will give you more details specifically around bus and the reserve projection for those particular operating funds. So turning quickly to our general fund. General fund is really funded by our property taxes, and our collections come in July and December of each year. We're projected to be right on balance this year, mainly because what we do have in the budget is the equity funds that are slowly being spent down. So we do expect that we will bring a carry forward amendment here first quarter to still move those forward, but they are still unspent. But really leaving the general fund with an unchanged balance for 2023. We do have within the general fund committed and assigned balances of the 7.7 million. Those are set aside for specific purposes, and just to remind you that that 7.7 is really for some risk insurance for compensated absences, which is the vacation time that people have accrued, and a small amount for our regional water supply. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ned for environmental services.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Ned Smith. I'm the Director of Pretreatment and Finance for Environmental Services. Environmental Services is looking pretty much on budget for the rest of 2023. Total revenues are going to be about $1.5 million higher. About 1.25 of that's due to higher interest rates on our reserves. So that's the one upside of our current interest situation. In addition, we've got a little bit more of money coming in from the American Rescue Plan. This was for our COVID wastewater testing. Our invoices came in on a different timing than what we had anticipated, and we can't get paid by the federal government until we send those invoices. So all the invoices came in 2023 instead of in 2022. So it's just really a timing offset. In terms of our expenses, we've also got some major offsets. Salaries are expected to be at $3.5 million under budget, but that's mostly offset by materials and supplies, which are about $3.6 million over budget. That's again primarily due to our ongoing inflation issues, supply chain issues, as well as it's kind of a good news, bad news, ongoing productivity of our maintenance staff. They're doing more work, they're getting more work done, which is costing more in supplies. But the long run is that'll save us money because things will be running better and not run to fail.
And then if I can, and then the salaries side, is that just because of vacancies that have persisted?
Madam Chair, yes, I'm sorry for that.
No,
That's a very critical point. Yes, it is due to our vacancies, our turnover. In terms of transfers, that's going to be under budget by about $700,000, and that's driven by our lower than expected interdivisional costs, which I believe is mostly driven by IS and IS. So we're grateful for the underrun, but worry about the services. All of this puts us in a situation where our operating reserves will increase by about $600,000 versus a budgeted $1.8 million decrease. So that'll put our total reserve at about $38.9 million, which exceeds our year-end target balance of $6.7. So a very healthy reserve situation.
Yes. Any questions on those slides? Keep going.
Moving on to SAC, it looks like a sad drop off, but really we are expecting to be down about 30%. Well, year to date, we're about down 30%. So we're thinking we're going to come in about 20,000. That does look like a drop, but you need to remember that 21 and 22 were records years for SAC collection all the way back to the 80s. I have to go back that far before we had a year that grew that much. So we had some wonderful SAC fortunes. I feel like we're kind of leveling out. This does put us about on par with 2017, 2018. All of this does mean that our SAC reserve did drop about $9 million, but we had budgeted for it to drop $10.5 million. So even 20,000 gave us a little bit of wiggle room. And you remember that drop was a use of reserves for pay-as-you-go to get ahead of some of our capital expenses. In terms of the balance, we're really seeing it pretty even from both the commercial and the revenue side. They're both down about 30% to last year. So as I mentioned on our reserve, you can see the reserve does drop a little bit, but it's still well above our policy minimum of about 55 million. So SAC continues to be in good shape. Of course, we're monitoring this to see if the drop continues. We do have a healthy reserve, so we can manage through a recession without having to increase our per SAC prices. But we will continue to monitor and stay on top of it and adjust as needed. And that concludes for Environment Services.
Any questions on that last?
I
Councilmember
have a
Stewart?
question. Thank you. It's great to have all these healthy reserves, but does it come a time where you have too many reserves that you're not reinvesting for capital projects or other things that might be useful?
So, Madam Chair and Councilmember Cedarberg, one of the interesting parts about that 38 million is about 8 million is already spoken for because we have received appropriations like White Bear Lake, that work up there. This also includes the Newport I&I specific grant that was in the past legislation. And then we also have some water efficiency and clean water grants that are in there where we've received the money, but we haven't spent the dollars yet. So we're really closer to 30 million. I am always comfortable with a generous reserve. Our reserve, the policy right now does not include our debt service. So, which is almost half of our budget. So I am comfortable, and that debt service bill comes due on a rainy day or a sunny day. And so I feel comfortable that 30 million is not too much, and I wouldn't want to see it drop much more.
Thank you.
Not to belabor the point, but is it unique, that's probably not the right word, but is that standard to not include debt service in the policy?
It is standard here at the council.
Okay, okay. Well,
Madam Chair,
yeah.
we are under, like, reviewing this. In fact, this is probably not the last time you'll see the target fund policy.
Yeah.
Because we will need to incorporate some capital side of this with the sales tax. And
Yes.
we are actually talking with our business partners on how to best represent our target balance and making sure that we have that balance with where we should be.
Yeah, I think that's, timing is right. And so to take and do whatever is, all of the things that could be impact, and then looking out there at best practices or whatever others are recommending we do, it would be great. So we look forward to seeing it come before us again.
Madam Chair, just one other, I am comfortable with our reserve, and I'm comfortable with not having it be too aggressive because we have such a diversified customer base. So we have 112 communities. Our top 10 customers are probably about 50%. So there's a little bit of concentration there, but I do feel we're diversified across the region.
That's a great point, thank you for that. Yes, okay. We're on the Housing and Redevelopment Authority.
Hi, I'm Heather. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Heather Giesel. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Director of Finance and Administration for CD and MTS. So HRA revenues are projected to be $700,000 favorable to budget. This is driven primarily by higher interest earnings than anticipated. Expenses are projected to be under budget by $1.6 million. This variance is primarily the result of housing choice voucher subsidies payments being less than we had projected. You may remember in the most recent budget amendment earlier this year that we, to account for higher housing choice voucher monthly rent and utility costs, we increased our budget, but these have grown more slowly than we had anticipated in the second half of the year. Other factors contributing to the variance include lower spending on contracted services and then lower general administrative expenses. Our projected reserve balance is ending the year at $16.6 million, and adding an additional $114,000, which is well above the target balance of $8.2 million.
Are there any questions on that? Great. Seeing none, moving on to MTS and Metro Mobility.
Yep, so moving on to Metro Mobility, revenue is projected to be unfavorable to budget by $700,000. This is a result of lower passenger fare revenues than budgeted. Ridership was budgeted at 100% of pre-COVID levels. We're coming in at about 85% for the last quarter, which continues the same trend that we saw after Q2. Total expenses are projected to end the year materially on budget. You'll see up there, it's about a 0.7% variance, so we're calling it on budget. This is driven by higher contracted expenses resulting from rate increases that we saw at the end of last year to align with Metro Transit's driver increases. The rate increases just happened at the end of the last year before we could get them into a budget amendment, so you're seeing those increases take place here in 2023. All of those rate increases have been factored into our 2024 budget. Fuel costs are down as a result of lower gas prices than anticipated and fewer vehicle hours on the road. Projected reserve balance is $29 million, approximately 3 times the target reserve balance of $10.5 million, but of course that target balance amount will go down the next time you see this report in accordance with the policy that was just presented today. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Are there any questions on that? All right, seeing none, we can move on to motor vehicle sales tax revenues.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair, committee members. Ed Petrie, Director of Finance with Metro Transit. I'll go through the motor vehicle sales tax and then through the Metro Transit family of services. First off, motor vehicle sales tax for the period through September, it totaled about $299 million. It's running at about 112.7% of the February forecast. So motor vehicle sales tax has been very strong, and also for the first 6 months compared to the November forecast, we're running just over 108% of forecast. So very strong receipts. So what that does is it brings our overall balances and reserves down to, or up to about $37.4 million for the year projected for the year. So very strong motor vehicle sales tax. As you recall, we budget 95%, 5% we set aside then use for future year operations.
Any questions on Councilmember Barker?
Thank you. Do we know, that's amazing, I'm surprised at that. So do we know, is it like the volume of cars or is it just the increase in price of cars?
I don't have that information.
Except for Madam Chair, the next presentation, Stewart will present for motor vehicle.
Okay.
We can get
The
into that.
Good
projection
answer.
amounts.
Great question, I was
Thank you.
thinking that too. All right,
Okay,
going.
Metro Transit bus operations. You can see we had a budgeted surplus of $49 million. We're coming in at the end of the year at $122 million surplus. You may say, well, wow, you budgeted a $49 million surplus. So that's one of the things we referred to earlier. If you recall, during the year, there was a lot of concern at the federal level about a federal clawback. We were being communicated by the American Transit Association that if you had balances left in your federal funds, pull it before there was a chance of losing it. So we adjusted our budget and pulled a lot of dollars in. As a result, we're sitting there with an ending year fund balance of about $261 million. We did a large pull in 2022. We did another large pull in 2023. So now we will spend those dollars out. The remaining dollars that we have that we'll spend largely in 2024, we have a little bit to spend like in first quarter of 25. But we had available expenses to pull the dollars in. We chose to pull it in, get it into our fund balance versus taking the chance of it getting clawed back.
And just briefly, so the clawback did not happen, but we were ready for it. And we have an election coming up, so just make sure that 2025 stuff, no matter what happens, is where it needs to be.
And Madam Chair, committee members, that's a very, very good point. That's one of the things that we're going to be watching and rewatching very closely, because the fact is we will have more than enough eligible expenses. So if we choose to pull it in before the election happens, you'll see a budget amendment come forward. We'll then pull the dollars in and put it into our fund balance.
Great.
Because that's the one thing we don't want to do is have those dollars disappear. So what will happen is when the budget that you adopt this evening is also going to show a significant use then of fund balance. It's these dollars that are in the fund balance that we'll then use in 2024.
Got it.
So, okay, so bottom line with the overall operation though, we come in at about $122 million. We have a surplus of about $72 million. The biggest piece of that surplus is mainly due to savings in operator labor. If you recall, we budgeted our service at levels at 80% in 2023. We started the year though, because due to lack of operators, at about 67% service level. We have been hiring operators very successfully throughout the year. We're going to end the year at about 80%. But you can imagine, since we budgeted 80 and only have actual at about 67 to start with, we will have those savings throughout the year. So we have savings in salaries, benefits, and fuel and parts due to reduced service levels. But like I said, once again, by the end of the year, we should be right on target. Our target right now for 2024 is 82.5% service levels of pre-pandemic, and we should be starting the year at about that level. So that is very good news for us. So overall, with Metro Transit, like I mentioned, $122 million positive surplus brings us into reserves of 261 versus a target of 34.
Great. Any questions on that? Seeing none?
Okay.
Transit light rail.
Yep, Metro Transit light rail operations. We had a budgeted use of reserves of $41,000. We're actually going to come in with a surplus of about $2 million. Now this is after we pay back our county partners. If you recall, we always had master operating funding agreements with the counties where we would contribute half of the subsidy, Hennepin County or Ramsey County would contribute the other half. Those agreements expired now September 30th of 2023, but for that first 9-month period, any budget surplus, whatever has to be, will be split 50-50 with our county partners. So this assumes already the payback to the counties. So it gives us a positive surplus of $2 million. Ending year balance of about $19 million versus a target of $8.5 million. So once again, very strong reserves on the light rail side. One of the things I'll mention is on ridership is that ridership and fares are basically right on top of budget. We've seen during the year, compared to 1 year ago, Blue Line ridership is up about 22%. Green Line ridership is up about 17%. One of the things I didn't mention on the bus slide is our bus ridership is up about 14% from 1 year ago. So all of our modes we're seeing nice growth from pre-COVID levels as we're moving ourselves back up. But overall, the savings on light rail systems mainly due to some open positions. As I think we've been reporting, I know Brian Funk has reported too, we were down about 8 or 9 operator positions and a few mechanics. That results in our overall savings in the light rail division. But bottom line, ending year reserves, $19 million versus a target of 8.
Any questions on that? Seeing none, let's keep going. Commuter rail.
Okay, commuter rail, which is North Star Operations. We had a projected use of reserves of about $2.5 million. We're actually gonna come in at $81,000. So we're basically, we're proud of that. So $81,000 surplus is gonna bring us to ending reserves of about $11 million versus target of 1.5. So once again, significant reserves. The biggest piece of the surplus is due to the fact that we had budgeted higher levels of service. If you recall, we were running 2 trips morning, 2 trips in the evening. We then increased that then in starting October 1st, I believe it was, up to 4 trips morning, 4 trips at night, and with especially event service. But we did have the savings in from the first nine months of the year, as resulted in the overall surplus due to savings with BNSF and fuel and parts. So that brings us to about $11 million surplus. Not ridership on North Star, I will say though, is up also. Small numbers, but it is up 24% from 1 year ago. So we're slowly seeing North Star start to inch back up.
And so I'll be brief, because I'm gonna look at Councilmember Barber or somebody, but. So again, I'm sorry that I can't recall this right now, but after the legislative session, are we fully responsible for service? Just somebody remind me how this, because we already had county partners that were reimbursing us, and that all was resolved, correct? It got wrapped into everything else that we're taking on?
Chair, very good question. So with the legislative session, what that did was for the partners that we had master operating funding agreements with, effect starting 10/1/2023, the council will now be responsible for all the operating costs. That's for the blue line, green line, North Star, Metro Orange line.
Okay.
So we're responsible, because previously the subsidy would have been split 50-50. On North Star commuter rail, though, we have the counties that are outside of the 7-county metro. That is Sherburne County and then MnDOT. So they are outside of the transit tax.
Okay, so we are still working with them then on
Yes.
a partnership or
Yeah.
reimbursement? Okay.
In fact, the MnDOT agreement with MnDOT, that was just signed and approved last week. So that's fully executed for 2024. We are still working with Sherburne County.
I know. Okay. Councilmember Barber, do you have anything on that at all?
No, I think that was what I was gonna say, was the MnDOT and Sherburne County part. I assume that we received any funds in? I know was a final fund amount due from Anoka County October 1st, but have we received anything in that?
Chair, committee members, Anoka County passed through their board that they would pay us $1,974,000. We had asked for approximately $3 million. They have paid us $1,974,000, and they paid us that through September 30th. We've received no funds since then.
All right, thank you.
We're still gonna expect the rest then, or do you need me to write a letter?
Chair, committee members, we are actually working with the chair on that and
Okay.
with legal, try to determine what the approach should be.
Yeah, I mean, okay, that'd be great. And I know too, just from the original estimates of ridership, when this was back in the Plenty administration, we're far from that, but it is very nice to see that we're inching back up again.
Yes.
And I'll save my other transportation questions for you at a later time. Councilmember Barber.
And just an additional comment on the North Star ridership. One of the things that we'll see, like how much it's really gonna kind of come back, will be as we get bad weather. With the storm and snowy weather and commuting, definitely drove a lot of the ridership and people, I like this. You know, it was sort of what was happening before the pandemic. But obviously we've had really nice weather. So I think we'll see kind of where it's headed by the end of the winter.
Yeah.
That's my gut.
And share one anecdote with that, to follow with what Councilmember Barber mentioned. Back pre-pandemic, we were running about 2,700 or 2,800 average weekday rides. All it took was one snowfall. The one snowfall would jump from 2,700 to 3,500 the very next day.
Interesting.
So snow brings the riders, so.
Interesting. Well, that's a good point. So I don't know if I'll personally be cheering for a lot of snow this winter, but on behalf of the Met Council, I'll put a good word in.
Snow does very well for us.
On my prayer list. Okay. Any more questions on that one? All right. Seeing none. So is that the end of?
That is the end.
Okay. So thank you for this. And again, everybody here at this council, you are all rock stars, but I really also appreciate when the 4 of you show up. And all of the good, and the next one will be great too. Just all that, we've got great people in charge of keeping us in line and doing the things we need to do, so I appreciate your hard work every day. And send thanks to your teams too. Thank you. Okay, let's move on now. This is another exciting one, MVST Sales and Use Tax and Economic Forecast Update. And we've got Stewart McMullan, Director of Budget, with us here, and this will be, this is always a good one, right? So looking forward to your presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Stewart McMullan, Budget Director here at the Council. A quick and I hope exciting update on the financial implications of the most recent state forecast to the Council. Please do stop me as I go with any questions you might have. Let's go to the first slide, please.
Yeah.
How's that?
Perfect.
This is a reminder of the changes, the legislative changes that were made this past session in changing the rate and the share of MVST that was allocated to the council. It was the intent of the legislature to keep the MVST amount the same to the council each year. The end of the session estimates had indicated we'd come out just slightly ahead, approximately $1 million per year more each year. It was hard to tell then, and it's kind of hard to tell now if that was a change due to the method or the economic circumstances in the economic forecast. So looking at then the most recent forecast for MVST, I'll talk briefly about a question that was posed earlier. MVST is increasing, and most of that is due to the increase in the price, average price of the car. The most recent data I saw, the average price of a new car in Minnesota is now more than $50,000. The supply and the volume isn't increasing as quickly as the price of the cars. It's the price of the cars going up that's driving the increase.
And can you just remind me too, I know there was an effort a while back and I can't remember if it passed, and I should know this, but on the leased vehicles, is MVST being captured?
Madam Chair, it is not. The sales tax on leases goes into the trunk highway fund,
Okay,
and
yeah.
by and large that goes to the Department of Transportation.
Okay, thank you.
Again, this table reflects the most recent forecast. These numbers are state fiscal year, July to June. The first row shows the actual amounts, and then the second row is the most recent forecast, which are the amounts that are now baked into the budget that you'll ultimately consider tonight for adoption. We've had a great year in 2023 for MVST. The actuals for state fiscal year are up $23.1 million, or 6.5% from what was forecast in February. The forecast for state fiscal year 24 is also up $24.4 million, or 6.9% from February. You'd note that the state fiscal year 25 forecast is for less MVST than in state fiscal year 24, but it's still $11.4 million more than they had forecast before, or 3.2%. Turning to the transportation sales and use tax, this is again a quick reminder of the terms of the new tax that was enacted and began October 1st, 2023. You'll remember the council adopted resolutions to implement both the transportation sales tax and the housing sales and use tax in the metro regions in July, as we were required to do. The forecast is slightly reduced from the end of session estimates. The timing for the Department of Revenue is a little off. They look at the sales tax revenues most closely in February and November as part of the forecast. They did this kind of mid-session, kind of the end of March. So this comparison is different than the comparison we just looked at for MVST, which is a comparison to the February forecast. This is a comparison to the unofficial end of session estimates. All that said, it's down $6 million, or 2%, for the first fiscal year, which is a partial year, and down slightly again in state fiscal year 25 to $9 million, or 1.9%. The last year of the forecast, state fiscal year 27, we end up essentially where we thought we would be, which is good for our 30-year forecast and the long-term financial plan that Ed and Heather presented earlier in the summer as part of the transportation budget. The year-over-year forecast growth is 3.9% and 3.8%. You might remember that the 30-year historical average for the state is 4.4%. So this is slightly less than that, but it's above the 3.0% assumed growth rate that we've kind of conservatively built into the financial forecast that's part of our long-term financial plan.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question, seeing this is the first time we're kind of doing these numbers. So is this just the 83% that is dedicated to the council?
Madam Chair, that's correct.
Okay, and then it would, and does it have the 5% and the 83% factored into?
Both, it's all of the money, Madam Chair, that's coming into the council, including the 95 and the 5.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, so this does include the 5%?
Madam Chair, it
Okay.
does.
And remind me again.
The 5%, the 5% of the 83% goes to TAB to get allocated for active transportation.
Got it.
But TAB made a decision to not do that for this cycle, but to kind of build a balance and distribute it starting the next solicitation.
Got it.
2 years.
Okay. Yep, it's a lot of stuff. And then just a quick question on that too, and I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask the question anyway for all people at home watching. So unlike the quarter-cent sales tax for housing, which has a formula, there's no formula on this for the county's portion, 17% that they're receiving for that. Is that correct? How it's distributed? I think there's purposes for it, but I don't think there's a formula.
Madam Chair, in the legislation that was enacted for our 83%, you might remember there's 13 different categories in which we're required to spend money over the course of time. The 17% that goes to the counties did not have that same stipulation, if that's the spirit of your question.
That is exactly the spirit of the question. Or a formula that would distribute it to cities in such a way that the housing formula. Okay, it's good to know. So everybody out there can hear about that. Okay, anything else on this slide? So it's good that it by, I think you said 27, we're getting back to where we thought we would be, so we can use our way.
Madam Chair, that's correct. That was a big number. It's a very important number to us because the entire plan going forward is kind of built on the state fiscal year 27 number.
Councilmember Barber.
And just a note, as we look at Metro Transit, you saw the numbers that were brought in of the relief funds that we wanted to, that's what helps all of this as we figure out the pacing of all this.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Okay, can we move on unless there's anything else? All right, keep going.
This last slide then notes the only changes that will be in the budget you consider tonight compared to the public comment budget you adopted in October. We've inserted the updated amounts from the November forecast for MVST and sales tax into the budget, and those changes are represented here, capturing the increased revenue from MVST and the increased revenue and expense for pass-through grants to the suburban transit providers, and the slightly slower amount of sales and use tax funds that would be in the sales and use tax reserve.
And if you wouldn't mind, and maybe this is for you or Councilmember Barber, on the increased revenue and pass-through grants to the suburban transit providers by 3.69 million, can you just give us a 1 or 2 sentence on that?
Madam,
Is that just that regular amount?
It's just the increase in invest.
Okay, so that's additional.
it's, Madam Chair, it's they receive the same percentage.
Got it.
The overall forecast is up. As I remember it, they receive about 12.4%. The overall percentage is up. They're going to get their share of that.
Great, thank you. Any questions on that? Well, thank you. This is a great report. It's incredible. All the change, the fiscal cliff, all the things that, at least for the past, since I've been around 5 years, Councilman Barber before me and all of you that have to live through this roller coaster that we're on, it looks like we're in good shape. And again, thanks to the legislature for coming through. stabilizing transportation and transit funding and also seeing that it, helping our partners out there as well. So, and thank you again for your hard work. Really appreciate it, because all of you, we get to sleep at night. I don't know how you do at night, but we're in good hands, and you just do a great job answering our questions and keeping us abreast of everything we need to know. So I'll help with our item when we get to it on our council agenda tonight. So thank you very much. All right, we are up for item 3 under information. That's FTA Semi-Annual Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Report. And we have Ashanti Payne, Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity Assistant Director. Welcome, Ashanti. Glad to see you today.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Council Committee members. Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director, Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. And as most of us are aware, as a recipient of federal funds through the U.S. Department of Transportation, administered by the Federal Transit Administration, part of the requirements to ensure continued receipt of those funds is that we report on a semi-annual basis on the federal DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. And I'm here to share with you both our second half DBE report and final 2023 fiscal year report. So our Disadvantaged Business Enterprise program is based on our overall goal as well as our individual contract goals that we established. Our annual goal for 2023 was 14%, and we set goals on construction, architectural and engineering, professional and technical contracts, and they are specific to that project. Very rarely do they equal our overall goal, but the goal is that cumulatively that we meet or exceed our overall goal. So right down to it, as you recall, in the first half, we were at a shortfall of 6.5%. Although I said we were hopeful that we could meet and still meet our overall goal, I have to be honest and say I didn't know that we would do this well and achieve 21.69% in the second half, resulting in an overall 2023 participation rate of 20.08%. This next slide really demonstrates how that's distributed. We saw definitely increases for Black Americans, especially for women, as well as Hispanic Americans. And previous years' reports, we had 0% participation for Black American women and Hispanic American women-owned firms. So that is definitely progress. Coincidentally, we did see some decreases relative to Asian Pacific American participation along with that. Just in terms of a number of firms and contracts that were involved in this report, again, you can see the overwhelming majority is for non-minority women, but also we saw increases for Black Americans and Hispanic Americans, as well as Native American firms. Some of the major contracts that contributed to this success, of course, is the engineering and project management service for Blue Line, which had a DBE commitment of 19%. Also, the Blue Line extension project for engineering and project management had a 19.2% commitment, B Line at 21.4%, and the Gold Line of Woodlands Park Station, Park and Ride, 16.4%. Some of the successes that are highlighted in this report, DB prime contracts, 5 different DB firms were awarded prime contracts. That is one of our key indicators that we look at. That's what really moves the bottom line when we can directly contract with certified small businesses, DBs and MCUBs. 4 contracts were awarded to Native American firms, 2 men, and 1 with multiple contracts. 8 contracts awarded to Black American firms, 4 women, 1 with multiple contracts, and 2 men with one with multiple contracts. 8 contracts to Hispanic American firms, 2 women-owned firms, and then 5 male firms, 1 with multiple contracts. This is really our progress in terms of where we are at, or where we have been in terms of achievement in our overall program goal, going back to 2019. 2019 and 2020, our goal was 15%. In 2021 through 2023, our overall program goal was 14%. And you can really see from 2020 on, we are moving in the right direction. We continue to set the bar, the pressure is on now for 2024.
I was gonna say no pressure, Ashanti. You set up before I did. We're here to support you. Great work.
Yes,
You know,
and
keep
I,
going, you know, I don't mean keep going. I mean, you're doing a great job. So, you know, and I through this procurement and all the changes that you've made and working with Jody and everybody else, I mean, we're seeing the results and they're fantastic.
Madam Chair and council members, that was just what I was about to say. I'd be remiss in saying that definitely OEO doesn't want to take all the credit for this. It is definitely our partnerships with procurement and Metro Transit and the business units that has led to this success.
Great.
This is just a comparison kind of showing what I mentioned before about Black American women-owned firms and Hispanic women-owned firms, where you see those blanks in those areas previously to where now we are getting participation from those groups. And also in terms of awarded dollars, much more of an equitable distribution among the demographic categories. We do see a drop in Caucasian women-owned firms, but I think this represents a more equitable distribution of how those dollars and contracts have been awarded. We've continued to talk about some of our process improvements and our targeted outreach. Again, I think you can see the results in terms of we really, through our outreach and engagement, targeted women-owned firms by Black women-owned firms and Hispanic women-owned firms, and it shows the results. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, relative to meet and greets, I had the opportunity to participate in an outreach and partnering event where I participated on a panel last week with hosted by HNTB. And
Ashanti, can you just say what HNTB is?
HNTB is an acronym for a consulting and engineering firm for the last names of probably four of those individuals.
Yep.
However, I didn't plan to stay as long as I did. I was trying to get to a basketball game, but I'm glad I did. There were several of the businesses that pulled me aside to tell me their experience and their stories working with the council. And one that I will share, one of the women-owned businesses there, through just a connection with our Metropolitan Council Environmental Services Department, there was a master contract that was in place. One of the managers from Environmental Services reached out to this business and said, "Hey, do you have anybody that can work on this scope of work?" And she responded, "Yes, I've got just the person," and gave him the information, the resume, and he was like, "Yes, I want this guy." And it took a while because a lot of the primes on that master contract wanted to propose something else, but he stuck to, "I want this person. We have a goal. We have this master contract. I want this person." And she said the difference that it made, one, she was able to keep this gentleman who was being sought out by other larger companies, but also that work allowed her to hire another young engineer to work on the Gold Line project. So we talk a lot about the goals, and they're important to keep us honest and on track, but these are the stories that we can definitely connect to our mission, create job creation, a prosperous economic growth in the region, directly connect to our strategic goals and missions. So wanted to share that story just to let folks know the work that we do here at the council makes a difference, and it's important as it impacts livelihoods and the lives of the folks that we serve.
Yeah, that's a great story. Those are the kinds of things that I think resonate, like we always say, beyond the walls of my council. And thanks for either being late or missing your basketball game. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I said some words about this the other night at Transportation Committee. It's amazing that you went from the numbers earlier this year to where we're at now. And I think such a key part of that is having subcontractors become prime contractors. And that's a big step for small businesses to take. And a lot of that has happened, I think, because we built a system here with the targeted outreach and the mentoring and all the different things where there's a really individualized approach to things that helps these businesses take that leap. So I think, it's a lot of work and a lot of connection and, I don't think we recognize enough how much we really are trying to work with the businesses and help them. And so, just thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And your team.
Thank you.
Everybody involved, and keep going. For those that haven't stepped up quite where we want them to, push, tell them to do their part, and we'll see better numbers going forward too. Councilmember Osman.
Yeah, well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ashanti. I think this number is very good. Looking forward, I see we have the target number of 14 for the last 3 years. So have we set the numbers for the next years, 24 or 25, or are we waiting until we finish the year?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Osman. Yes, we just went through the process of setting our goal for federal fiscal years 2024 through 2026, and it is at 13.4%. And you might ask why we've got this achievement, and we had 14%, we went down to 13.4%. What's the rationale behind that? And it is really due to the forecast of work for the next 3 years. And there's a big portion, I think the number was 65% of our projected budgeted work is in a category where we don't have any Minnesota DBE based firms, and there are only 3 nationally that have taken the time to get certified with the Minnesota Unified Certification Program. So that influences the availability calculation that goes into establishing that goal. The other part of that is what we found out is that's one-time federal funds as well that for this area. So that's kind of the biggest reason behind kind of is that projected work is in an area where we don't have a lot of DBEs currently.
And is that only for year 24 or 24 and 25?
Of course, that could change over those years. We could get DB certified.
I mean, setting the 13.4.
Oh, it's for,
one
I'm sorry.
year only, or all 3 next year?
Yes, all 3 next years. We set our goals according to federal regulation on a triennial basis. So this last period was from 21 through 2023. The next will go through 26, and then the next 3 years after that.
And it was quite a process to get to the exact number that we did, and that was great. And yeah, there's actually, I'm not sure if you were at that meeting, but you can go back and kind of watch the report out on the entire process of the 3 years. So various ways to measure and come up with the formula to come up with numbers, and then kind of balance them all out and then weigh it against the projects coming up and things like that. I think I remembered most of it, but it was a lot of work, and we appreciate you doing that too, because we want our numbers to be very defensible, and that was part of it too, where we're not just doing this, but that there's a very robust method that's been tested behind everything that we set. So, yeah. Any other questions? Do you have anything else for us, Ashanti?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, anything else? Okay, great work. Again, thank you to everybody behind you and with you and alongside you on this, and just keep going. We appreciate it.
Thank
Very
you.
much. All right, we have one information item left on our agenda today, and that is Racial Equity Dividends Index. And we've got Cy Jordan, our Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity Director. Thanks, Cy, for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Good to be here. Thank you, Chair Johnson. Cy Jordan, Director of the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity, here to share with you some highlights on our participation in the Racial Equity Dividends Index. And so I don't know, many of you may start to hear in the news or through other communications from other participating agencies about their scores and the results that they received in this index. And so I want to speak to you specifically about what the overall process was, what Metropolitan Council score was at a high level, and that we'll have more to come in the beginning of the year. So the Racial Equity Dividends Index is being led by the Center for Economic Inclusion. We've done quite a lot of work with them in the past on other projects with the goal to accelerate the government progress in racial equity standards. And so we were one of 22 public organizations that participated in this survey in 2023. They've done this survey twice before with the private sector. This is their first go at it with public sector. And there were 18 organizations from the metro area, 4 in greater Minnesota, and that included 12 small cities with populations under 75,000, at or under 75,000, and then 4 mid-sized cities with populations over 75,000. We were a part of the 6 large governments with populations of residents over 250,000. So organizational size, not by employees, but by how many residents we serve within the region. And there was a total of 70 racial equity standards that we were all measured against, with that being across 11 dimensions. And those dimensions here, I won't read them all, but they range anywhere from leadership and hiring to culture, procurement, finance, through public safety, housing, and public policy. At Metropolitan Council, we have some news to celebrate that we were a high-scoring organization in 3 of the categories, so 1 being hiring, the 2nd being workforce development, and the 3rd being public safety. As a part of this survey, we, NOEO, gathered information across the organization. So we took the 70 questions that were given to us by CEI, made sure that each of our divisions and departments and units across the organization assigned somebody to be responsive to the individual questions, provide documentation associated with their response, and then communicated that onto CEI. And so this is a part of that result. And so the things that we were highlighted for in those 3 areas were around our MTS work with the equity study that's happening around transportation planning, with work in modifying minimum qualifications needed for various jobs, and removing work history questions for positions like bus and train operator roles. And then 2-person application process. So for each of our positions, we now have 2 individuals that do the SME review of initial applications before moving them on to the interview process. And then community-based recruitment. Also, we have a formal 6-month mentorship program called Mentoring Works that has been with the council for some time, and I understand that we are continuing our work in that and even looking to refresh that in 2024 as well, so continuing to advance in that work. And then we have our Emerging Leaders internal development programming with a lot of professional development opportunity around Project Manager, the PMD program we have internally, and our Leadership Academy. We've had great success, as you've heard, through transportation as well in our workforce development, where we have pathways for pre-apprenticeship. And one of our great successes is that over the last 5 years in that program, having graduates come out that may be starting with even GEDs or not yet reaching that level when they join us, being able to move into positions starting at wages of $60,000 is a great achievement. And then we do have in place our government-to-government travel relations policy, and also recognized for the public safety implementation with 2/3 of those racial equity standards being met. taking a closer look, there has been a public report out, and we've got a nice brochure here that we could probably order a few more from CEI as well, but this is the public aggregated document for the study, for the index. We have an individual Metropolitan Council report as well. And in that report, there's more detail provided specific to our organization, and we'll get a one-on-one debriefing with CEI in January and be able to speak more specifically to some action steps to take after that report out. But for right now, given our resident population of over 3.1 million, this is how we compare in terms of racial demographics at the areas that is the focus of the CEI project around Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, or Asian. It gives our sample of how many employees at a snapshot in time when we took this survey back in September, and then the comparison between other large local governments. And so our index score comparison, we were the highest scoring agency in the large organization area, and we had 59.3 out of 100. The average for other large local governments is 34.9, and the average overall is 29.3 for this particular study.
Can I ask a quick question? And
Yes.
I can read the report too. Did Minneapolis and St. Paul and Hennepin Ramsey participate, do you know, in this?
I believe, Madam Chair, I believe that all of those organizations did participate. I'll have to take a closer look. They're listed in the back.
Yeah,
but
no
I
worries.
believe the major cities did participate.
I can follow up with you later. Just always kind of just, some of those really big ones that are layered on top of us, but it's just a random question. We can figure it out later. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'll take a look. I think that I do want to change that answer. I may have heard that the city of Minneapolis did not participate, maybe doing a separate study, but again, I can check the brochure for the exact organizations out of the 22 that participated.
Sure, thank you.
And so Metropolitan Council, our overall score, we scored there were 70 standards, 67 of those are what we've scored against. Some were not applicable to us in the public policy arena. We have 28 of those 67 standards where we are fully implementing based upon our responses. And so across the categories, we have 7 out of 12 in leadership, 6 out of 7 in hiring. We have 6 of 10 in cultural retention and advancement, procurement 4 of 7, budget and finance 0 of 5, community and economic development, we have the 2 of 4 and the 3 of 3 in workforce development. And also a highest score, a mid score of 4 of 9 in the housing and 3 of 4 in public safety, and then public policy 0 of the 6, with some of those areas not being applicable to us as an organization. One of the points that has come up in a lot of the discussions about the survey is that out of the 22, 13 of the 22 organizations with Metropolitan Council being included score very highly around public safety, and so there's been discussion of why that point has been addressed so frequently among agencies, and so it's being related to the George Floyd murder and the unrest that happened, and that many organizations are put into a position of being responsive and have done a very good job in doing that. And so how can we keep that same momentum across the other racial equity standards and categories that we could be responsive to? And so Metropolitan Council has 3 current recommendations at a high level. Again, we will have a briefing and go into more detail, but one of them being around continuing in building on our strength of procurement by increasing investment with the categories of Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, and Asian-owned suppliers, and raising our internal accountability for meeting our diversity goals in those areas. And then the second, we have an important role in leading in infrastructure investment, and so we want to continue to consider historic underinvestment as well as infrastructure quality. And then in that third recommendation, Metropolitan Council, we can continue to be proactive in our public engagement, particularly around our operating capital budgets. We do a lot of engagement on the back end in many cases of what we have determined and what we're rejecting. And so the suggestion is that we get some early engagement before we even get to that first draft of our budget. And we'll continue to get additional recommendations. So while we are celebrating as an organization, and it is well deserved for being the highest scoring organization, we have 39 of those areas that are somewhat in place that we'll continue to work on and being fully implemented, and then addressing those areas that we're not yet addressing and reaching the racial equity standards. So good success, and we're in the same position as many other organizations where this is a tool for awareness, but now comes the action and accountability around fully implementing all standards for the index as well. Our recommendations in OEO are going to continue to be that we invest in an enterprise equity plan, and a part of that is going to be a comprehensive equity assessment. That is different from the small business equity assessment, and so this will continue to look at our examination of our equity decisions across the organization and our policies and procedures, but also take a closer look at some of the root causes that impact the gaps and inhibit us from getting to the opportunities that we want to be at in advancing equity across our organization. We'll also be looking to participate in a disability index in 2024, and then we have some opportunities recently that we've shared in continuing work with the CEI and being a part of their racial reckoning tour, and there'll be additional events and work that we can do with CEI. We are sunsetting the larger convening of the Anti-Racism and Economic Justice Trust, which is closely related to this work, but continuing on in the actions and looking at how we'll otherwise be utilizing our relationship with CEI. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Are there any questions? So I just want to say, Councilman Rosman, go ahead.
I just want to clarify. These recommendations, these three recommendations, is it the area that we haven't do
Chair and Council Member, yes, those recommendations apply to areas where we can continue to grow and advance.
Thank you.
And I'd say just even tonight in reports, we've seen great advancement in some areas. I think especially is making sure that we've got that internal accountability here at the Met Council, because again, it should be everybody's work that we're doing. And so it's not just OEEO that's out there telling people what they need to do, but everybody here is embracing this work as their own work throughout the council. And this is wonderful. So congratulations again to you and everybody at the council, and thank you for steeping yourself into this. I'm assuming, this will continue on so we can have a benchmark and continue to see where we score year over year. And we're fully behind you in this work. If there's anything you need from us, let us know. And the other thing I was gonna ask you, so as it relates, as we're rolling out and continuing to put systems in place where we can continue to do better and meet our goals, how is that, how are people held accountable, and how is that audited here internally too? Is that under OEEO, or just making sure that the work that's out there, there's kind of a tracking system to it to make sure that people are doing everything that they can? Is there such a thing, or are we working towards that?
Chair Johnson, if I understand, generally, if I understand your question, how are we tracking our accountability or responsibility towards meeting goals? And
yes,
we can speak specifically to areas such as our small business goals that we set. And so we have a much more streamlined approach to tracking that. We need some technology in order to do better in the way that we're doing that, and we've done a proposal to get some assistance in that so that we can move from manual work to having a consistent system that we can look to. And so in that regard, we do have capacity and ability to track. If we're looking across the board at how we're doing on this racial equity index, that is a part of what we're asking for in a full enterprise plan, where we have the ability to track and to be cohesive in how we're being intentional about our standards and application and implementation, and then on the back end be able to measure against metrics. So that is what we're looking forward to.
And is that a 2024 goal essentially?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think that's awesome, and it's a big lift. But, that's gonna systematize and get in place, I think, what we certainly need to move these numbers and impact communities. And again, I just wanna make sure that, it's, people feel very responsible to this work too. So whether this is not for you, but I'm looking at you. But just kind of there's an HR component of this too, so that when people are being reviewed and looking for progress on their work that they're assigned to and things like that, that there's an element of this that I think should come into play, to make sure that everybody's very committed and it's part of their work plan and workflow too throughout the council. So thank you, Sai, you're doing a great job. We really appreciate you. I know this has not been easy. There's always pushback on this, but you're doing so much good work, and this honor and recognition is huge. And we know that it'll just propel us to keep going and, move our numbers and get better results in these other categories with these recommendations too, so.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson and committee members, and all great points, and certainly around this being not the work of just OEO. So the work we do is not specific to goals within OEO. It is to meet the objectives of the organization and the mission that we have of economic prosperity, and to implement the actual action that's going to get us there. And so we recognize that and appreciate that from the council.
You can certainly quote me on that in any way you want. We're rolling it out. I mean, this council does expect everybody in this organization to be on board and really own it. So we'll be looking for that so that, when we get further reports, you're getting the help that you need across the whole organization. And then certainly as we systematize this, so it's not a manual, just like everything else, you've got to have the tools that you need to be as effective and efficient as you can. So, thank you very much. All right, we have nothing else to come before this group, so without objection, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.